Shadow of Mordor seems like it went under the radar for a lot of people, and that's really quite unfortunate. It's very solid, very fun, and most importantly, it actually feels like it could take place in the Lord of the Rings universe. It's your standard semi-stealth based action-adventure game with fighting mechanics not too dissimilar from the Batman Arkham games. The actual premise is pretty basic, but what really makes this game stand out is the Nemesis system, a function that basically creates a hierarchy of characters, where the orc captains can change positions based on how many times they personally kill you, effectively making them your nemesis. At face value, this is a quirky feature that can prove to be fairly interesting and enjoyable to experience, but I think that it brings to attention what the role of AI in games is altogether. For ages, action-adventure games and similar genres have revolved around the protagonist, the bosses, and the more easily dispatched enemies. It's a formula that works just fine, but at the same time, it feels very video gamey. It's straightforward and formulaic, which, while not a bad thing, is possibly the most predictable thing in gaming. As games advance and become more complex, new gameplay styles are introduced that drastically change the layout of the whole game. Take Shadow of the Colossus, for example. The game doesn't even have enemies. The player fights 16 boss battles, and that's it. It breaks the formula, tries something new, and succeeds. Shadow of Mordor does something similar with this rival system, as it blurs the line between basic enemy and boss character. Each NPC is randomly assigned a name, specific traits, and personality to round off their character. This means that literally every single enemy you encounter has the chance to become one of the most powerful orcs you face. This dynamic of gaining and losing power breathes new life into simply dispatching enemies, as giving each one some level of potential importance adds a layer of depth. Possibly the most lifelike aspect of this is how the player can encounter the captains at any given time. This means that at one moment you could be hunting down an orc captain only to stumble upon another more powerful fellow. The game isn't huge by any means, but it's one of the most alive worlds I've had the pleasure of existing in for a long time. A few years ago, we were promised that next-gen technology will allow us to be more directly present in games than ever before, and there were some games that really hyped gamers up. One of these games was Watch Dogs. Watch Dogs was supposed to have a realistic world in a similar sense to Shadow of Mordor, where each NPC actually had a personality. The game ended up being almost unanimously disappointing, but one of the main reasons was simply because it lacked so much depth. To create the illusion of realism, the players were able to scan any NPC walking down the street to see their name, age, salary, etc. The opportunity that was missed here was to actually let the player do something with that information. Yeah, you can hack some people's bank accounts and some people's phone calls, but that's completely irrelevant to the information acquired. I think Shallow could sum up its failure pretty well. Both Watch Dogs and Shadow of Mordor attempted to make their game more lively by giving each character traits, but Watch Dogs simply wasn't fleshed out enough to feel like it was worth the trouble. So, all in all, Shadow of Mordor is a good game that implemented an awesome mechanic that allows the player to become more invested in their own endeavors than the game's actual storyline if they so please. A game doesn't have to let the player do whatever they want to feel like they're having an individual experience. I think an important aspect a lot of games miss is that if the player doesn't feel personally attached to the game in some way or another, they most likely won't feel as fondly towards it as a game that allows them to be invested directly. Games exist in many shapes and forms, and with more and more new techniques being tried out, I have no doubt that the next few years will yield some of the most unique experiences in games we've had in a long time.